I think that have just been completely sick and allergic to the way that discourse has happened around topics that I hold really dear, which is sexual freedom, individual agency, relationships between men and women, love and sex, modern dating. All of these things felt like they got absolutely poison pilled over the last 10 years.
Welcome to the Unspeakable podcast. I'm your host, Meghan Daum. That is how I just pronounced my name. Is it going to stick? We shall see. Anyway, my guest is returning guest, I think 4-time returning guest, Sarah Hepola. Sarah is one of my favorite people to have on the podcast. She has a way of making the most surprising and intense conversations also feel leisurely and relaxed. It's a perfect conversation to have for the summer. We're going to be kind of taking things a little more easily for the next couple of weeks. Anyway, Sarah covers all kinds of subjects in her writing and also in the podcast she does with Nancy Rommelmann, Smoke 'Em If You Got 'Em. But she's especially insightful when it comes to challenging assumptions and conventional wisdom around power dynamics in relationships, especially when it comes to the Me Too movement. Sarah loves digging into high-profile Me Too cases. She covered the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial for her podcast. And she's talked with me here about the case of Brock Turner, the Stanford swimmer who was convicted of felony sexual assault in 2016. She has also done some deep dives into Harvey Weinstein's rape conviction in New York, which was recently overturned. Anyway, we talk about all of that here, as well as Sarah's new job as a staff features writer at her hometown newspaper, the Dallas Morning News. She talks about the freedom she's gained from doing local reporting rather than arguing with people online about national politics. She also talks about the book she's writing, which is about staying single into middle age, despite her desire to settle down and have a family. And she even talks about a brand new relationship she's in with a man 12 years younger, an Unspeakable exclusive. We cover a lot of ground here. If you are not yet a paying subscriber, you are going to hear a pretty sizable portion of it, about 40 minutes, but there is almost a whole other hour after that. So if you want to hear that part, go to meghandaum.substack.com and become a paying subscriber. In the meantime, here's my conversation with Sarah Hepola. Sarah Hepola, welcome back to The Unspeakable.
Meghan Daum. We meet again.
Oh, and you pronounce my name Daum. I think I might go back to...
Oh, damn it.
No. Actually, this is very helpful because I'm thinking of going back to that pronunciation. I've just made a complete mess out of my name and I rue the day. This actually causes me quite a bit of agita.
I'll bet, because to change your name is one thing. Like if you just thought people that are like, don't call me Meghan, call me, Texie or something.
Oh.
And then that's hard, but you changed the pronunciation, which is so subtle. It's such a subtle tweak.
Yeah, and then to change it back, I'm like a detransitioner. I'm like a name. I'm like there's so much at stake now. Like I'm embarrassed.
What if I just called you Meghan Daum?
That sounds like a hyphenated. It sounds like I married myself and I hyphenated the name. I don't know. I might. Look. Anyway, we don't have to dwell on this. Welcome to the show, however you want to pronounce my name, Sarah Hepola. And people probably call you Sarah Hepola. Do they ever do that?
Oh my God, all the time. Hepola, Hepula. I got Hepola once, which I thought was cute.
And it's Finnish, right? It's not Italian.
No, it's Finnish. You're right. You're correct.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we always have so much to talk about. I think you come on the show about once a year. And one of the things I love talking with you about is not only writing, the art of writing, especially personal essay writing, because you're a fantastic personal essay writer and you've also been an editor in that genre, but just like how things are going in this whole creator space, the new creative economy. Obviously, you do a phenomenal podcast with Nancy Rommelmann called Smoke 'Em If You Got 'Em. But you have also taken a day job.
Oh my God.
Rumor has it. So I want to hear about that. You're a staff features reporter at the Dallas Morning News. You made an honest woman out of yourself.
Meghan, let me tell you something. Every 2 weeks, money appears in my account.
Oh my God.
I don't even do anything. Like I do a job. I do a job. No, I do a job, but I'm telling you, I don't fill out paperwork. I don't invoice. It's crazy. And it keeps happening every 2 weeks. And benefits, there's benefits in this job. And when they say benefits, it sounds kind of vague, like, oh, what are the benefits? Well, I mean, this health insurance situation is amazing. So, I mean, you and I have been freelancers and free agents and out there in the wilderness for years. And a lot of our, dinner conversations or podcast conversations or whatever have been around this like, oh my God, it's so hard. What are you going to do? And I just broke down, like, I think it was my 49th birthday. So it's almost a year ago because I'll turn 50 in August. And I was having breakfast with a friend and I was like, she was like, how are you doing? And I have no poker face. I don't know how you are, but like, I can never lie.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm totally broke and I'm scared and I'm staring into middle age like I might be irrelevant. She was like, all right, well, happy
I'm already
birthday.
there. Yes,
happy birthday.
Exactly. Might be.
Might be.
Put that on your vision board. It's there.
No, I mean, seriously, it is. And, I mean, this is a side note, but, like as you get older as a woman, you go through this thing called perimenopause and it gives you brain fog. And I had really bad brain fog for about 2 years. And so the thing that I had come to rely on the most, which was the sharpness of my observation and memory, was gone.
Oh.
And it freaked me out. Like, do you remember that, what's her name that wrote a big piece on menopause in the New York Times? Sarah, do you know what I'm talking about?
Should we look it up?
It was a big piece. And she interviews this writer that had kind of like stopped her career at 50. And she's like, why did you do that? And the woman's like, oh, well, menopause. Like I couldn't put sentences together.
Oh, it's Susan Dominus.
Susan Dominus.
Yeah. Yes, of course. The legendary Susan Dominus.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was in February 2023.
Yeah. And I read that and I was like, oh my God, that's going to be me. So anyway, I was freaking out and my friend was like, Sarah, I have listened to you for a few years and I think it is time for you to get a job. And I was like, I know, but that. And I decided to just go ahead and throw my hat in the ring for a couple different positions and kind of see what worked out. And the one that worked out, it took a long time. It took months. I'm glad I wasn't like, because it turned out like I got another, freelance, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I make this point to say like, usually you reach out for jobs because you're like desperate and then it takes them like 6 months.
Yeah, especially lately, it takes a really long time to get a job. People go through just multiple interviews over months, seems like.
It just took months. And I was like, okay. But it was at the local paper and our Dallas Morning News. And, I don't know how you've written for the LA Times.
Yeah.
So you have done the daily journalism beat. I never had. And I kind of saw myself as not of that world because originally, like I was so voicey and first person that it was anathema to the daily newspaper reporters.
Right.
And then I think as I got a little more expansive in what I did, I just really saw myself in the magazine vein.
Right.
And so I had this like, writer at large position at Texas Monthly, which is a great publication. But by the way, writer at large is what they give you when they don't give you anything else.
Right.
Like when they're like, we have
producer.
No, we don't have anything to give you, but what will you take this title? And I'm like, okay, sounds important. And I don't want to throw shade on them because I love them and they've been really good to me, but they did not have a staff position available for me or anybody else. And, I really needed a steady income. So I was hired to do this thing called High Profile, which is basically like an old brand that they were bringing back, and it focuses on big personalities and insider scenes. But they have given me like an enormous amount of flexibility about what I report on. Like originally I was like, oh my God, am I basically going to be like a gossip columnist for a daily paper? And I'm going to be doing what we used to call a boldface column. where you're like, so Mark Cuban was seen at the ringside.
Stepping out.
I wonder what his wife thinks. Like, am I going to do that? But they wanted the same idea, which is basically like, talk about the people that are in this neighborhood being the larger Dallas and Fort Worth area, which is huge, and tell us stories about ourselves, right? And they've given me so much flexibility to figure out what that is. So I've done everything from go to WrestleMania, which was, by the way, totally amazing and fun, to driving a Rolls Royce, test driving it, which was also really fun, to going to black tie galas, to sitting in Harlan Crow's library, the famous Harlan Crow who gave all that stuff to Clarence Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
And Harlan Crow's library is like not to be missed, can I say? It looks like something out of Hogwarts.
Is it open to the public? How does one go in there?
Well, I don't know. That whole area, they do a lot of events in there. I mean, it's not open to the public like a museum, but it is open to the public in the sense that they hold tons of events in there. And I was sitting at this table and I was like, there's like all this, it's like flanked with books. And there's these bookcases that say like Washington, Jefferson. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. He's named the bookcases after the presidents. No, that's their original stuff. That's their writings. But I was sitting next to a glass case and I was like, I wonder what's in the glass case. And I leaned over and it was one of drafts of Letter from a Birmingham Jail.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, I feel like I'm dining in the Smithsonian or something. It was so wild. Wow. So anyway, it has taken me into all these parts of Dallas that I don't normally see. A lot of them are high end. Some of them are low end. I mean, I went to a Taylor Swift fan convention.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite, stories that I wrote. And, of course I get to like meet really interesting characters. So I've been having a blast. And I have a lot of complaints about it that I won't share with you on the air because that would be stupid. Even to say this is dumb because they're like, wait, you have complaints? But, like a lot of daily papers were built for a different century and they're running on the tracks of the 21st century, i.e. the online world. And they're trying to get this infrastructure that was built for another century to move into the 21st century. And I think I feel like if you're not the New York Times, who I think has excelled at this transition.
Yes.
I think that everybody's struggling.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, it's a good sign that the Dallas Morning News is even in a position to hire somebody like you for this kind of beat. I mean.
I know. I mean, they had a big layoff right before I came on. So it's kind of like, okay, what am I signing up for here? But I also think it was an older news staff, It was a lot of people that had been around. The Dallas Morning News has been like one of the more profitable titles over the years. But I think all newspapers that are not called the New York Times have really struggled transitioning in these last 20 years.
Yeah.
It's just, how do you continue to keep your economic model and give your product away for free? How do you do that? And how do you promote yourself online if you don't give the product away? So in other words, how do you grow your brand if you're paywalling it?
Yep.
I mean, we have this problem with Substackers.
The problem with the podcast. We'll get to that in a second. I mean, the New York Times, a lot of it is they've figured out the secret sauce with puzzles.
Oh, totally.
And recipes. I mean, that's what's kind of bankrolling the news operation.
I mean, I don't even dip a toe into those things, but like my understanding is that like Wordle and the recipe bank and all that stuff is like keeping that place afloat.
Yeah.
And it's basically what BuzzFeed did with cat videos.
Or the listicles. Yeah. Or the, right. Or the, it's seven ways, or which Taylor Swift orthodonture appliance are you?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. But yeah. And so other places that haven't quite been as savvy or made the right acquisitions, maybe they threw some money into like local stuff that didn't turn out right. But I think one of the things that has excited me the most, and I'm curious to hear what you think about this, was like it suddenly occurred to me that so much of what was wrong in the world was wrong because we were all arguing about national politics, but had almost zero control over it.
Mm-hmm.
So like all of the online strife is across state lines, but it's like me in Texas arguing with somebody in New York about something that happened in Kansas. And it's like,
Right.
why? Why are we doing this? And meanwhile, who's running for city government? What's happening in City Hall? No. I don't
Right.
know. A lot of people, the more kind of like bedbound we become as a society, the more it's like, okay, I live in Dallas, but like I spend all my time in this virtual space.
Yeah.
Well, what's going on around me? And it occurred to me that like the more time I spent in my city with people, the happier I was.
Oh,
And
that's
that I
great.
was badly disconnected from my own city. People would say like, how's Dallas? And I'd be like, there's nothing to do. And they'd be like, well, what do you do? And I was like, well, I stay at home, and it's like, what, how can you know what there is to do if you don't go out? And it's so funny. It's just like, I had detached from social engagement, which I think for me started happening when I quit drinking 14 years ago. I
Oh.
stopped going out into the world, and then I wasn't dating anybody. And, and I just sort of started doing this thing, which was I talked to my friends on the phone. I engage with people online and on podcasts, and I watch Netflix, and I talk to my parents who are here in town and my brother. But like, other than that, I didn't have a lot of engagement. So I just realized that like, we all need to focus more locally. And I'm like not at all I never give advice, and I never tell people what to do because I'm so defiant that if somebody tells me what to do, I'm like, shut up, I'll do the opposite. But I really do believe that we could all be a little less unhappy if we just thought a little bit more about things that are in our hula hoop, as we use an analog in AA, which is, like, what can you control? It's what's inside your hula hoop. And the whole world is outside your hula hoop. And I feel like all of online discourse is like, let's argue about what's outside the hula hoop.
Right. That I have no real understanding of because
None.
it's outside of my domain. Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. You're in Dallas. You
True.
also have been talking about culture war stuff for the last several years now. I think the first time you came on the podcast, you talked about your Atlantic piece,
Yeah.
the stuff I'm afraid to write about. Obviously you and Nancy cover, culture war subjects, touchy subjects. Do you think that if you were in a city other than Dallas, like a more sort of, coastal city, a blue city, you might have had a harder time getting this job given your track record when it comes to talking about things?
Yeah, I keep waiting to get canceled by one of the younger kids. Like, I'm like, they're going to Google me at one point and be like, yeah, we got to get rid of her. But so far, everybody's been lovely. Everybody's been lovely. Yes, I do. I do think that. I think the interesting thing about Dallas is that it is a city that, like all the cities in Texas, vote blue. They've gone blue in the last many elections. But the rural areas vote red and the suburbs vote red as well. And so that's the tension in Texas, like a lot of different states that are kind of what we would call purple. The tension is between city and rural, or urban and rural. And so, but what's interesting about Dallas is that it is not, this has always been a frustration for me as a writer. It's not a very literary city. It's becoming more of one. But it's not like Austin where everybody's like super plugged into things. Well, even Austin, they're not that much. It's not like New York where they're super plugged into things.
Yeah, but Austin, at least, like, we know what the independent bookstore is. They're like the hip and cool bookstore. If you're a writer, you probably got sent there on book tour as opposed to Dallas, where
Dallas does have a couple of independent bookstores, but they're tiny, and they're mostly known to a really niche community. I'll make some plugs right now for them. The Wild Detectives, which is one of my favorite names of a bookstore. And then Deep Vellum, which is also a great bookstore. And then Interrobang. These are all great bookstores, but they're not known like Book People, or you're exactly right. Like on the sort of like years ago, I wrote a story about living in Dallas. And I said that I wanted to live in one of the approved cities. And I listed Portland, Austin, and LA. And one Meghan Dom emailed me and said, I love this phrase. Keep it. And
approved,
I always have.
I did. I don't remember that. Approved cities. That's what I liked. Yeah, I do like that.
Yeah. You said, I love that. And so, Dallas is not one of the approved cities. And one of the reasons why is that it's really much more of a business and financial center. And so it has a lot of that energy, and it's a sports town. And so a lot of those are kind of like anathema to the fragile literary, cultural world that we live in. So it's a little harder to be an arts person here. But the point of all this is that buffets it from the culture wars. And the thing that made it so hard to live in Dallas for a long time has actually made it much easier to live in Dallas, which is that people are not like spending all their time online arguing about the culture wars.
Yeah.
And most people that I hang out with might not even know that I do a podcast with Nancy. If they do, they probably don't listen to it. I've gotten accustomed to like, operating on two levels, which is you talk with your online friends and you're like, Coleman Hughes, Twitter, deplatforming,
right.
and
heterodox,
heterodox, all these things, and then everyone that you talk in the outside world they don't know anything that I just said. I have this new boyfriend, which is like total breaking news in the Sarah Hepola department.
Oh wow!
I know.
Heard it here, maybe first or second. Amazing.
What's that?
Wait, sorry. Is this breaking news on this podcast, or did you?
Well, I don't know that I've talked about it on Smoke 'Em, but I don't think I called him my boyfriend. But I mean, he is. But he is a millennial. He's 37.
Oh.
And he's also not online.
Wow.
And between those two things is like, the other day he was like, deplatforming. Tell me what you mean by that. And I was like, really? And he's super smart. He's like a physics, computer science person. And, so it's not like doesn't know what words mean.
Right. He wasn't asking you to define it in the dictionary.
No, he wasn't asking me to define it. He just meant like, why? Tell me what's the context that you're using that in. And it's just not his world. He just doesn't, he cares about what's in his hula hoop, and that's not it.
Yeah.
And it's just really, really interesting to operate. I think it's very healthy for me. It's a way of touching grass, even if touching grass means touching cement here in Dallas.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like the theme of this conversation is how to touch grass. Like this is a huge lesson. You have done it in a huge way. There's plenty of grass in Texas. Come on. You're the home of the grassy knoll. In Dallas, you're touching the grassy knoll.
Yeah, it is. That's true. I've never thought about the fact that the grassy knoll is here in Dallas, but it's such a cement city. The reason that it's called that is because it's only this little triangle of grass. And the people downtown that we're developing are like, we shall make a triangle and we shall call it a grassy knoll. But, this whole area is all prairie lands. This is all flat blackland prairie. So once upon a time, it was all very, very grassy. And you still see pockets of that, of course. But yes, and where I live here in my East Dallas little abode, I'm surrounded by trees. I've got a big overgrown garden outside. I've got a beautiful, 10 minutes from downtown, but it still feels really bucolic. So I've got a great setup here.
Yeah.
But, it's about touching grass. And also I think it's about making our way back from what was the madness. Like in 2020 or 2016 or wherever you want to put the pin in the map, maybe it's 2012 or 2013. We went through some stuff as a culture and as journalists, and I see the system correcting in so many different ways. I was really super proud that when I made the announcement that I was going to be doing a position at the Dallas Morning News, Ben Smith at Semaphore, who covers media, saw fit to mention it in his column.
Yeah.
That he sees it as a really healthy new trend, which is, and these are his words, big time writers taking jobs at local papers.
Right.
And, the joke is on him because I am not a big time writer, but I mean, especially since nobody in my city knows who the hell I am. But they only know me, by the way. This is so cute. This is so my city. They only know me, Meghan, because I make appearances on the sports radio shows.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's legit.
I know. It's adorable.
You know about sports? What do you go on
to
talk about?
Remember I did that podcast on the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders?
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah. So I started doing appearances on The Ticket, which is a local, very beloved radio station. And then I'm now a correspondent on a really cool podcast called The Dumb Zone, which if you listen to Mike Pesca's The Gist,
Yes.
they were just interviewed on it and he's a big fan, which just goes to show you that's, you can have a dumb name and still be a great podcast.
Well, yeah, for sure.
And
have a dumb name and still try to be a great person.
And yeah, I know. I've been doing it for 49 years.
And you had, speaking of Mike Pesca, you and Nancy recently had Mike and his son on your podcast. So let's shift for a minute and talk about your podcast. So first of all, how are you managing to do all of this? You're doing this full-time job and yet you're still doing the podcast, which by the way, it's not enough for us just to do weekly episodes anymore. You have to do bonus stuff for the paying subscribers and it's just more and more and more and more. How do you cope?
Can you believe the hustle? The hustle.
No,
do you remember the 90s? And everybody was like, I'm so stressed.
I thought I was so busy.
You want to go back and be like, what were you doing?
I was smoking cigarettes. I was really busy sitting at my desk, listening to music and smoking.
I was just drinking and smoking.
I was doing that as well. Right?
I literally got off work at 5 o'clock every day and was like, what am I going to do tonight? I guess I'm just going to go to the bar and smoke and drink. And then the next morning I would wake up at 9 and be like, I'm so stressed. So stressed.
I used to go and get the New York Times and sit in a diner and read it.
Yeah.
Because I thought that's what you were supposed to do if you lived in Manhattan. I would be too antsy to sit in a diner for 5 seconds and read. I would just be like, I gotta go.
Just the luxury of time that we had back then. It's just phenomenal to me. So, you asked how I did it. I've asked you the same question because you do not one, but 2 podcasts. And, I sometimes feel like I'm drowning with one, but I did take on this position and, it was a little insane for the first month or 2 because I was finishing up a big cover story for Texas Monthly on Monica Aldama, who's the woman from Cheer, which was the big pandemic success story. And she's had a series of scandals. And, we might talk about that briefly because that was a really interesting moment for me because it is the first time I have written a story that pushes back on the excesses of Me Too. And that publication, which is Texas Monthly, which granted, Texas Monthly, we're in Texas. We're purple, not blue necessarily, but I did not get pushback from my editors there. In fact, I got so much support. They were so supportive of this story, even when it was going into uncomfortable places, which is to say that the crux of the story is around a former student of hers filing a claim of sexual assault against a student on the team and against her for a culture of cover-up.
Yeah, this is kind of like Joe Paterno sort of thing.
They attempted a kind of Joe Paterno takedown. And it kind of worked in the sense that Monica, who was the top of her profession in this exploding industry of cheer, she was by far the most recognized. She'd had a best-selling book. She'd been on Dancing with the Stars. A lot of people don't know her because cheer is a very if you know it, you know it really well.
I loved it. I was fascinated by it.
I loved it.
I thought your piece was fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I loved doing it. But she was really brought down by this. She was suspended by the governing body. She was dropped from business deals. She went into hiding. A lot of the stuff that we know happens when these allegations break wide and you can't control them or fight back at them because your best defense is to stay quiet. And meanwhile, everything that fills the void is just what a monster you are. And it has very little, it really was the whole story, which is very long. It's 12,000 words, but it's a cautionary tale in viral fame.
Yeah.
And I was finishing that. And meanwhile, I'm finishing my memoir, which is due on July 8th. But listen to my voice, Meghan. I'm calm. I'm not freaking out right now.
No.
And it's just I feel like it's going to get done, and part of what has happened for me is that I think I finally crested a corner where I was just and not everything's not perfect. There's so many things at the podcast and our podcast, Smoke 'em If You Got 'em, which I love so much. And I love my pod partner, Nancy Rommelmann, but our logo, we need to fix it. And we have this thing that's wrong. We have so many things that are wrong, tech wise. And we just do workarounds. And it's we'll get there, I'm not going to stress it. And the paper, I wish I did more. And I wish all sorts of things, but you can just only do so much. So I've had to just kind of temper my insatiable ambition because you can only do so much. And I'm really quite proud of what I do. I love all the things I do. And my book's gonna, my book's mostly done. I'm just trying to cut it down because it was too long.
Oh.
So I had a draft before I took the job at the Dallas Morning News. I felt more comfortable doing that, having a draft and then starting this job and saying, I'm going to let it cool for a couple months, then I'll go back to it. But of course, I thought I was going to have extra time. Once I started that job, my whole life took off like a rocket ship. And then, of course, I go and start dating somebody, which was so unexpected.
Did you meet this person in the context of doing your job? This is another vote for having an actual job.
Well, I met this person in a coffee shop.
Oh.
And I was at the coffee shop because I was there for a meeting. I had a meeting with somebody for my job at 10 o'clock and I'd gotten there at 9. And so I had an hour to kill and I was in line and he started talking to me. And we just had this instant, rapport, but I didn't think anything about it.
Yeah, really. He's definitely not extremely online if he's still talking to women in coffee shops, because people who are on Twitter know that that's not allowed anymore.
I know.
Part of the discourse.
I know. And then listen to what he did. We were waiting for our coffee and I went to go put my, laptop away, set my laptop up. And I came back and he was looking down and he goes oh, look, it worked. And I was like, what worked? And he was like, look, I made a rose for you. He had taken a piece of a napkin and he had made it into a rose. And
Wow.
He handed it to me. And he said, I'd like to ask you out. Would you
oh my God.
go out with me?
Did you think somebody there was a hidden camera somewhere? Some kind of social experiment?
Me? Is it a social experiment?
Not that he was, I don't know, that it was some kind of reality show.
He was so at ease in his own skin. And it was what I had instantly made me comfortable talking to him when we were in line, because we were in line for a little while.
Yeah.
That I felt so much but he kind of scanned, he was younger than me, and he kind of scanned to me as a tech bro, which I don't think he likes this description because he's not, but he had workout clothes on because he was going to the gym. And he had nice sneakers. And I just thought oh, he's a tech bro. He's got a girlfriend. He's not interested in he's not trying to pick me up. He just wants to talk to me. And I was happy to talk to him because he's a really lovely person, very funny, easygoing, knowledgeable. It just, you meet your kind and it's kind of a lovely thing. And so when he did that, I was just wow, that was so old school. I mean, it was so old school. I put it on Twitter. I was so knocked out. And I really thought I will never see this person again because it was so meet cute.
Right.
And I was just oh, this person does this all the time. And I'm one of 5 people he picked up. That's probably what I thought in my mind, was not that it was a punk.
Yeah.
Like he was punking me, but that he goes around to coffee shops and picks people up with this.
Right.
And he was I said this to him later, and he was I've actually never done that, but I was a bartender for a long time. So I did learn how to make that paper rose, which I have employed before.
Oh, okay.
But, it was so easy. And then he asked me out on a date and he paid for the date and he chose a really nice restaurant. And I was just who is this guy? And I wasn't looking to date anybody, but it's just when you meet somebody and you just don't want to stop talking to them.
Did he know what your age difference was, or did either of you? When did that come up, your ages?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably when we went to dinner together, it probably became apparent because I think I probably said something about it. And then I wanted to know how old he was. So he's 37, I'm 49. And then it wasn't an issue, but then as we got serious, I haven't talked about this on Smoke 'Em, so this is an exclusive. But, really my big concern was that as we talked about going really slow, because we didn't, I mean, we went on several dates before anything happened. We were just so old fashioned and slow. But what was happening during that time was we were getting very emotionally close as we were talking hours and hours and hours and getting to know each other. And I'm starting to think I'm getting really attached to this guy. And I don't know if he wants kids, and I'm almost 50. And that to me was the big sticking point was if he wants a family of his own, we can't and shouldn't date.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a drag. I mean, I think there's so much to be said about older women and younger guys. But if you're somebody like me that hasn't had a family and still wants one, you have to be careful. And a lot of times younger men don't know what they want. Like I always found the Demi Moore, Ashton Kutcher story a very much cautionary tale. Do you know what caused their breakup?
I actually didn't follow them closely ever. So no, you can tell me.
So I'm pretty sure this is from memory, but I'm pretty sure that, they were together for many, many years. And then he decided that he wanted a child and she couldn't do it. And so he ends up with Mila Kunis, who then they have a baby.
Oh.
And it's very, Demi Moore is really struggling with this. She writes a memoir. It's all about like her depression and getting older and stuff. And, I just thought that it's no one's to blame. Like, I think they started dating when he was much younger. And he was like, yeah, no, it's fine. And then suddenly it's not fine.
Right.
And I can't fault him for that. And if that's indeed what happened. And so anyway, I just have watched this happen over the years and I was nervous about it. And then, we were like, I don't know what date it was, but it was maybe like a month in. And he just looked at me one day and he was like, I'd be fine if I didn't have kids. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And then, later he was like, I'd be also cool adopting. And like, I didn't even have to like coax this out of him. So that was really nice.
Wow. So how long has it been?
It's only been 2 months, but it feels like a million years.
Yeah, no, you sound, I mean, we talk fairly often and you have, there's like a bounce in your voice that
oh my God,
I'm so
smitten.
in a long time.
I'm so smitten. I can't, I feel like I'm jinxing this. So like, I can't, like he's going to break up with me. Like
all right,
I'm going to
we'll paywall this portion. So
paywall this portion
only
because
5
like,
people
honestly,
will hear it,
I'm
so
checking.
Won't jinx anything.
Yeah. I'm checking my text messages to make sure he hasn't dumped me while I was on this phone call. While I was on the Zoom.
I would unpaywall. Yeah, that would be good. If we could just live stream your whole relationship on this podcast, actually.
Oh my God.
That would be
so heartbroken.
That'd be a coup
this
for me.
Guy. And, it's so weird because I'm having to transition to being a person with a relationship. And my whole last 10, 15 years of my life has been a single person. And my book is about being single.
Yeah, well, I was going to say this is a perfect segue into your book. So tell us what your book is about. I'm assuming it's, changed a lot. You've been working on it for a number of years, so it's evolved, no doubt. What's the basic premise now?
I mean, for the last year or two, the idea has been it's called Unattached. The idea is kind of stepping up to the life that you didn't know you were building for yourself, and the idea being that I wanted to be married, I wanted to have kids, but I became a woman who was in her 40s and didn't have either of those things and kind of looked around like, did I do this or did it happen to me? And I think that is true for a lot of people in midlife, that it might not be the specific of my story, which are around, kids and marriage, but it might be around your job. It might be around your family or the city that you live in. I mean, you can see ways in which fate pushed you one direction and then other ways in which you laid down the tracks for the exact life that you're building for yourself, no matter what you want to say. And so, trying to this is kind of like a nuance is our thing, right? And so trying to get the nuance of this story at a time when a lot of the dialogue is like, I'm single, I don't need men, fuck relationships, I never wanted children, fuck children.
Right.
And it's like, okay, great. I mean, if that really is your jam, especially with the children thing, there's a lot of people that don't want children and it just seems only rational to me that they shouldn't have them.
Well, and the people yelling loudest about how they don't want children are often the ones that secretly do.
That is 100% true. But then you have people like Bill Maher where you're like, no, you genuinely don't like children and probably should not have them. But, I wanted children. I still want children, but I'm also open to the idea that having children, quote unquote, might look differently than what I imagined. I.e., I've taught school. I've come on your pod and talked about the UTD, University of Texas at Dallas course that I taught. I loved those students. I've had, people that I mentor. It's just, I'm open to other things, but that's what Unattached is about. And so it looks through the last 10 to 15 years of my relationships and choices and kind of how did I end up here? And so you walk through a couple of unconventional decisions, some that didn't turn out the way that I wanted them to, some that did. And, you try to figure out how you got to this place. Well, one of the problems with the book was always that it didn't have this rom-com ending. You kind of walk through the wilderness with this person and you want her to meet somebody. And I was really adamant that I really am angry about books where women write about singlehood, but they're married.
Oh, I know.
And it makes me angry. And I love those women. I actually know a few of them myself. Like, I love them deeply. But I am annoyed by the idea that I'm out here promoting singlehood, but meanwhile, I'm going home to my husband or my boyfriend. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's always spun like this is a reported look. I mean, Rebecca Traister is the obvious example, right? She wrote all the single ladies, and she's
two
a
books,
phenomenal reporter. And
yeah,
she did it as a reporter, but she's married.
And Rebecca wrote a book about singlehood. I think she started at a time when she was single. Then she met her husband, Darius. And I don't even know if she talks about what his name is. Probably so. Anyway, her husband. And, I understand how that happened for her. And it's the same thing I think happened with Kate Bullock's book and Spinster,
right,
where she was living with somebody when it came out. But it was just like, it was a 1-2 punch for me as somebody that was genuinely single to be seeing these two women talk about, like, beautiful, lovely women. I consider them both friends and I admire both their work. And they were very much not single. And it was very strange. I mean, it's something I talked to Rebecca about. I talked to both of them about it because I spent a lot of time we were all on the sort of book circuit at the time because Blackout had just come out. And, Rebecca told me that all the women that come up to her are like, how can I find a boyfriend? And it's funny because she thinks she's writing about like the dignity of singlehood, and all the people that read her book are like, how can I get out of this?
Right.
And she's like, no, you're not hearing me. Like, it's a really important like phase of self-development. And I like that book.
The operative word being phase.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Not your entire life.
No, but that's 100% right. And I was starting to feel like I was stuck in orbit. I was like some astronaut that had launched into space and was now caught in orbit and couldn't go back home. And I was going to be stuck in this singlehood for the rest of my life. And I was really angry about it. And I didn't know how to, and when I would write earlier, like drafts of the book, people would be like, well, I think we need to, land our readers at a like more peaceful place. And I'm like, well, what's the peace? What is the peace? Sometimes life doesn't give you peace. We're going to land at a non-peaceful place because that's true to life. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's true. But that's still like a not satisfying reader experience. So like secretly, or like between you, me, and the people listening to this pod, I am actually feeling like guilty and conflicted about the fact that like I am actually at a really happy, peaceful place.
Yeah, I know. You're going to have to lie. You're going to have to say that you found peace and, and end the book with you're at a yoga retreat, just having an epiphany.
I'm going to lie. I'm not going to tell anybody.
Coca-Cola ad.
I'm going to pull an Ariel Levy and just not mention the fact that like I got married.
Right. Right.
No, I'm not going to do that. I think I'm going to put the little coffee shop scene in there, but it's just like, it's a new beginning.
Oh, yes. Yes. You know what? Put that, sorry, I'm going to put it as like it's a cliffhanger.
It's a cliffhanger.
Like he talks to you at the coffee shop. He hands you the rose.
And what is it? Is it another person that is just like, tunneling through the bodies of, online dating and this one guy that's learned how to game people in a coffee shop? Or is it the next chapter or book of my life? And the truth is, I don't know yet. I mean, I'm 2 months into this, so it would be folly for me to go, for instance, on your podcast and talk openly about how crazy I am about this guy. That would be foolish. I would never do that.
I think it's such a great framing for the book because, there is this whole, I don't need men, I'm an independent woman discourse, but there's also this sort of equal and opposite discourse that I find myself in a lot now, especially doing the podcast with Sarah, who's so much younger. And that is, women, you need to settle down by the time you're 25, you've hit the wall. That was the first half of my conversation with Sarah Hepola. It only gets juicier from there, so become a paying subscriber to the Substack so you can hear the rest. You can hear the entire interview every single week. Go to meghandaum.substack.com. All kinds of good stuff there, including more writing from me. In the meantime, I can tell you that Sarah Hepola is a features staff writer at the Dallas Morning News and the co-host with Nancy Rommelmann of the Smoke 'Em If You Got 'Em podcast. She's also done amazing writing on the Substack for that podcast, which you should check out and subscribe to. She's the author of the 2015 best-selling memoir, Blackout, and has done so many other things. I can barely list them here. So I won't go find her, but really, go become a paying subscriber to this podcast. It's not going to get any better. You might as well do it now. I mean, the show gets better all the time. I mean, it's never going to be a better time, okay? Don't wait for things to change. No time like the present. Anyway, thanks for listening. I will be back next week with another super nuanced guest. See you then.